Hello and welcome to the Voice of Iron, and on this session, I'll be reading and ranting about the Victor Assault Battlemech. First, I'll be going over the canon information that we have from SARNA.net, and then I'll be giving my personal thoughts and experiences with this chassis. Description: The Victor was built in 2508, under contract to the Terran hegemony, as a support mech with jump capabilities. With the creation of the Star League, the Victor would go on to serve in the SLDF during the Reunification War, after which it was made available to the League's member states. Because it only ever served in line regiments, the Victor was never outfitted with the advanced technology reserved for Royal units, a fact which would increase its survivability in the years ahead. Standing at 14 meters tall, the Victor approaches the concept of support in an unorthodox way for a mech of its weight class. While only possessing a ground speed of 64.8 kilometers per hour, the Victor achieves a high degree of mobility instead through the use of 4 jump jets, allowing it to jump up to 120 meters. A Victor can therefore support friendly units by jumping directly into the fray and bringing its deadly close-range arsenal to bear, an ability which can surprise inexperienced mech warriors and prove advantageous in mountainous terrain. One sacrifice made for this superb mobility is the mech's relatively light armor of only 11.5 tons, while the lack of proper anti-infantry capabilities is a minor problem. An estimated 1,000 Victors have been produced by the time the Star League fell. Many of these left with Alexander Kerensky during the Exodus, and when Hildco Interplanetary's 3 Victor factories were destroyed during the First Succession War, the mech became a prized target, with all sides scrambling to salvage serviceable units. Only Independence weaponry retained the ability to build new Victors, and with their capture by the Federated Suns during the Second Succession War, it became the AFFS's primary assault mech and a favorite command model for battalion and regimental commanders. Though the Draconis Combine would eventually retake the company following the War of 3039, most Kurita samurai were too proud to adopt a mech now associated with their enemy. While the Davians made do with purchasing new models from the rebuilt Hildco factory in the St. Ives Compact and funding the construction of Styx Tau Mechworks. By the time of the clan invasion, new models of Victors were being produced which incorporated newly rediscovered Lost Tech into their design. The formation of the Second Star League and destruction of Clan Smoke Jaguar would finally win the design acceptance by Combine warriors, while the conquest of Styx and St. Ives by the Capellan Confederation forced the Federated Commonwealth to contract General Motors to build more Victors. Though it had officially fallen out of favor, during the Fedcom Civil War, the Victor remained the favorite of Allied forces, with newer variants seeing use in the years afterwards. Weapons and equipment. The Victor's primary weapon is a Pontiac 100 autocannon 20 in its right arm. Though some models reported problems with the ammunition feed, this was not a common issue. The left arm contained the mech's close-range backup of 2 Sorenstein 5 medium lasers with a Holley SRM-4 located in the left torso. The autocannon alone is capable of downing most light mechs in a single shot and stripping off the armor of any location on most heavier mechs, leaving its other weapons to take advantage of any weak points in the enemy's armor. These weapons were originally aimed by a Standis 20 targeting and tracking system, but its tendency to project ghost targets saw the Standis replaced by the Melandri 34. Variants. An early variant of the Victor, the VTR-9A carries a machine gun and 2 flamers. To add these, 3 tons of armor was removed from the mech. The additional weapons give the Victor very capable anti-infantry capabilities, but with the thinner armor, the Victor is more susceptible to being critically damaged by another mech. A modification of the 9A model, the 9A1, adds only 2 machine guns to the mech for anti-infantry use. The mech has 10 tons of armor, making it better protected than the 9A model, and 2 machine guns allow the mech to have excellent anti-infantry combat capabilities. An upgrade using Starleague technology, the VTR-9D replaces the autocannon 20 with a Gauss rifle, which can do serious damage at much greater ranges. The mech also carries 2 medium pulse lasers and an SRM-4 launcher for close combat. In order to make these changes possible, the 9D is built on an endosteel chassis. With the weight saved, the mech also carries an additional ton of armor. The VTR-9K was identical to the VTR-9D upgrade for all intents and purposes. The only difference is that the components are sourced from different manufacturers. The VTR-9KA. This Victor variant emerged during the Jihad. Equipped with 5 improved jump jets, it can rapidly close with enemy forces to bring its autocannon 20 into play. 6 tons of ammunition allow the pilot to choose from many types of special ammunition. The only drawback to this model is that it only has a single medium laser for backup. The VTR-9S Victor removes a ton of armor from 9B and uses the saved weight to upgrade the SRM-4 launcher to an SRM-6 launcher. This simple upgrade makes the Victor more effective at close ranges. A more recent variant of the Victor, produced on New Valentia, the VTR-10D is an excellent close combat mech. The 10D variant mounts a powerful Ultra Autocannon 20 as its primary weapon. This is supported by 2 ER medium lasers and a Streak SRM-4 to finish off a damaged target. The 10D is also capable of jumping up to 120 meters, making it an excellent urban combat machine. The VTR-10L is armed with a Gauss rifle as its primary long-range weapon. This is backed up by 3 ER medium lasers and a Streak SRM-6 launcher for close combat. The mech carries an ECM suite as part of its stealth armor system, which allows it to reduce its radar signature and makes the mech harder to target, especially at long range, and also 4 jump jets that allow the mech to seize the high ground, making this variant of the Victor an excellent sniper. The VTR-10S is armed with a mammoth heavy Gauss rifle, split between the right and center torsos, supported by a standard Gauss rifle in the right arm, SRM-4 in the left torso, and twin ER medium lasers in the left arm. Carrying the usual Victor weapons loadout in addition to the heavy Gauss rifle is made possible through the use of an endosteel frame and fragile 320 rated extra light engine. Lacking the jump jets for which most Victors are renowned, the 10S mounts an anti-missile system and is clad in 13 tons of standard plating. The 10S carries 3 tons of heavy Gauss reloads, 2 of standard Gauss rounds, and a single ton of SRM and AMS ammo each. Production began on the VTR-11D on New Valentia during the FedCom Civil War. Powered by a light engine, the 11D adds an additional 1.5 tons of armor over that of the 10D. 2 ER large lasers provide long-range firepower, and the Streak SRM-4 is retained. The autocannon is replaced with a rotary autocannon 5 and 3 tons of ammunition in a case-protected bin. A C3 slave allows integration with a C3 unit. 15 double heat sinks are able to effectively manage the heat levels. A return to the classic formula, the Victor VTR-12D has a Gauss rifle in the right arm, 2 medium re-engineered lasers in the left arm, and an SRM-4 in the left torso. To improve survivability, this configuration uses a light engine and a heavy-duty gyro. The weapons are tied into an advanced targeting computer, and the right torso carries a Case 2 system to protect against missiles and Gauss rifle explosions. Based on the 9K variant, the VTR-C was built to incorporate a C3 slave unit, allowing the mech to work as part of a C3 lance. In order to do this, a heatsink was removed. Otherwise, this variant of the Victor is identical to the 9K. The VTR-CR. A 3069 field refit, this version uses a then experimental C3 boosted slave to cut through the electronic interference common on Jihad battlefields. In addition, it replaces the Gauss rifle with a hypervelocity AC-10. A Streak SRM-4 and a pair of medium lasers round out the armament. case systems protect the ammunition. And finally, a Clantech retrofit of SLDF VTR-9B Victors, the Victor C was intended for second line and Saloma troops. This variant swaps the large-bore autocannon for a Gauss rifle, the SRM rack for an advanced Streak SRM-4, and standard medium lasers for paired ER medium lasers. Unlike the similarly armed 9D and 9K variants, lighter clan weaponry allows this swap without the need to utilize an endosteel chassis. 2 extra standard heatsinks are also included. All of these Victor chassis have just one design quirk of note, the rugged design quirk. And now, personal notes. So the Victor is yet another mech that I was familiar with from back in my MechWarrior 4 Mercenaries days. Of course, back then I was most familiar with the Gauss rifle variant, at least to my recollection. But recently I decided to pick it back up. It was one of the first models that I actually played on the tabletop, and then in MechWarrior 5 I decided to go on a couple of missions with it to see how it held up. My initial thought, just looking at its loadout, was, well, this is clearly just a straight upgrade of the Centurion, right? I mean, similar armor, just a direct upgrade of the autocannon from a 10 to a 20, SERM instead of a LERM, and then the 2 medium lasers are retained, right? Well, that's what I thought going in, only to find that the mech ultimately was its own sort of monster. Not only does the change from LERMs to SERMs mean that this is now just a dedicated up-close and personal brawler, but the jump jets really did change the way that I played this. Now, I have to admit, it felt a little too fragile for its tonnage. I mean, an 80-ton mech that could be taken down with the same ease as a medium mech, or 30 tons lighter, that just didn't feel right. Not to mention that since 2 sets of important weapon systems are on the arms instead of more torso-mounted, I would lose my primary weapon and even my secondaries with the lasers fairly often, as opposed to the Centurion, which at least would keep its missiles and its lasers in its torso so that it was safer. That said, of course, I made a couple of simple modifications that made things easier. I stripped out a couple of heat sinks and 1 ton of ammunition in order to make my life a lot easier and up-armor this thing so that it felt a little better to taste. Now, in terms of that armament, as much as I may have complained that it being on the arms makes it easy to destroy, it hurts things. 1 or 2 shots of that AC-20 is usually enough to take down a mech, especially in combination with the crit-seeking SERM-4 and those twin medium lasers just to finish the job. One downside, though, and I don't mean any disrespect to the Victor with this, but the Thunderbolt is almost better in every way. It has more armor, it has more overall firepower, it's equal in speed, it's cheaper and 15 tons lighter. The only advantage the Victor has is its jump capabilities. But that said, if you know how to use those jump jets, it actually becomes quite a neat little monster. Let me give an example. Sure, the Thunderbolt can outshoot this thing pretty much any day and will survive longer than this thing will directly. But one thing that I have learned to do with the Victor, and I did this a little bit in MechWarrior Online as well back in the day, I would just get behind a piece of cover after tracking where an enemy is, jump up directly above it, fire my AC-20, or just straight Alpha Strike, depending on if I have the heat or not, and then fall right back down with no problem. I mean, is there anything more terrifying than a massive AC-20 shot coming from above cover from something that you could not see, and then going right back around to try and take a revenge shot at it only to see that it's gone? I mean, Ghost AC-20 scary. I mean, like, not to mention, it's a lot more competent than the only other thing that I can think of that can do that, which would be the UMR-60L, the AC-20 variant of the Urban Mech. Not to mention that this thing has more ammunition, even stripped down, and way more defensive capabilities and speed. Now, comparing a Victor to an Urban Mech might sound insulting, but I promise you, this is more just in line of this thing's good at city fighting, especially if there's buildings to hide behind, or, as Sarna mentioned, mountainous terrain. Pretty much anything that has big rocky areas that you can hide behind, this thing is useful for. I tried out a couple other variants, more specifically the variant with melee capabilities. I believe it is the VTR-9P. And it's fun, if reckless. I mean, again, because this thing has thinner armor, it's not exactly the most adept, but 80 tons with a bespoke melee weapon is scary. I mean, as long as you're not getting ganged up on, which you probably will be if you're running out in front with a Victor. But if you're not ganged up on, you can wreck things. You can wreck whole lances with that. But overall, I just like to tinker with the original build a little bit. Strip away some of the heat sinks, and yeah, that means I have to heat manage a little better, but strip away maybe a ton of ammunition or so, and just go to town with that AC-20, and you can risk being a little more bold, especially if you're using those jump jets to full capabilities. It's fun on the tabletop, it's fun in MechWarrior 4 and 5, and overall, it is a very, very satisfying mech to drive if you know what you're doing. If you're expecting just to go in and brawl like you can with a Centurion against similarly weighted things, or in something like an Atlas, you will be disappointed with this mech chassis. But if you go into it understanding that this is more of a fire support mech in close-in situations, or an urban fighter, or something where you're more likely to go up against things that are lighter than you. In other words, going up against Centurions and heavy and medium mechs especially. This thing is disturbingly effective. Again, that AC-20 does not mess around. If you've got a good eye, or good rolls in the case of the tabletop, light mechs will go away. I don't care how fast they're running, an AC-20 only needs one successful hit. Just watch your ammo and your heat. But overall, those are my thoughts on the Victor. I've had some good times on the table, had some good times in MechWarrior 5, even had some good times in MechWarrior Online with this thing. And overall, it's just a pretty decent design, but it has a very specific role. Anyway, that concludes today's Reading and Rant, and thank you for listening to my voice.